My name is Kristin Selby Gonzalez, and I'm going to be doing a lecture called Understanding Steps and Options for Autism Spectrum Disorder. Before I get started, I'll give you kind of a recap a little bit of who I am and why I'm here. I'm a mother of a child with autism who was diagnosed at 2 years, 4 months. If you watched Module 1, I kind of gave a little bit of background on that, but if you haven't watched it, one, I'd recommend going to watch Module 1 before you watch this one. However, if you have, you haven't watched it and you don't know, basically my background, my son was told, or I was told about my son that he would never look, he would never talk, and he would never have any friends. He'd be in a group home by the time he was 8. And fast forward to where he is today, he's 10 years old, and he is looking, he's talking, he's for the first time getting friends, he's riding a bike, he's potty trained, definitely not in a group home, not recovered yet, but we are definitely working on that, and again, just, never going to give up. And a lot of the things that we talk about in these modules, and again, there's 5 modules, 1 through 5, are basically things that are options for our children and our kiddos out there that are on the autism spectrum. And again, there's just so many options. There are so many things to choose from today, and so many things are helping our kids be able to be mainstreamed and to really live the life that we all dream for them. Today, like I said, I'm going to be talking about different options, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a recap on Module 1. The last one we talked about diet and digestion, and I really emphasized what we put in our bodies has a direct effect on how we act, feel, and behave. And also we talked about digestion issues, and those are things like bloating, constipation, diarrhea. We talked about what enzymes were, and we talked about that when we cook our food, we denature our enzymes, and that means at 118 degrees, we are denaturing the enzymes in our food. And basically that means there's no activity or very little activity left to help break down that food for proper digestion and absorption. We also talked about, a lot of us are eating fast food and processed foods, and we have to think about how many enzymes are in those foods that are left to be able to help us absorb those vitamins and nutrients and really help break that food up. We also talked about, why would a child at the age of 2 who has autism have issues already with enzyme deficiencies, and some of the theories out there are, perhaps some of the pathways may be blocked due to viruses, yeast, metals, bacteria, and really the list goes on and on. We also talked about digestive enzymes and where to find those, and we talked about Digest Spectrum from Enzymedica as being one of the options we could look into for a digestive enzyme. Again, if you have not seen Module 1, highly recommend going and watching that. But again, now this is Module 2, so we're going to be now starting on understanding steps and options for autism spectrum disorders, and tonight we're going to be talking about doctors and specialists, and what does that mean. We're going to be talking about toxin-free cleaners and household products, and also we're going to be giving you an intro to the next module, which is sensory integration and why that is so important. So the first thing we're going to talk about is doctors and specialists and reasons we should see a doctor who is specializing in autism. Well, the reason for that is, think about it. If you have a toothache, you're not going to go to a podiatrist, right? You're going to go to a dentist. Why? Because a dentist is a doctor who specializes in our teeth. Podiatrist is a doctor who specializes in our feet, right? So the same reason we would go to a doctor specializing in autism. We really want to find doctors who really have a vast knowledge on not just what autism is, but also what many of the new protocols and a lot of the new research that is out there. There are many different types of doctors. You have your naturopathic doctors, you have your homeopathic doctors, you have your, used to be called your Defeat Autism Now doctors, now they're called Autism Research Institute doctors, ARI. You also have some doctors called AMAB doctors. These are doctors also specializing, and one of the newer doctors that are out are called MAPS doctors. These are doctors that go to what is a MAPS training. And so we really have a huge range of doctors out there. I'm very excited about MAPS. I would definitely Google that and Google Maps and Google Autism and be able to find more out about that. They're doing some great work out there. You also have doctors that sometimes we don't really consider doctors to what we would think as mainstream doctors, but they definitely have their place. Maybe acupuncturists or chiropractors. These are definitely people that are doctors in the sense of, that is their specialty. And the other thing is you have pediatricians now that are stepping up to the plate and really doing a lot more research and learning a lot about the new protocols and the new research that's out there. Some of the things we want to do is we want to interview our doctor. We want to ask them, how long have you been working with children with autism? How much success have you seen working with children with autism? I mean, is your client list fairly large, or are you only working with 10 kids, or are you working with 250 kids? The other thing is we want to ask them questions of, when's the last time you went to a conference? There's many great conferences out there. You have Autism One conferences. Again, I talked about MAPS conferences. You have National Autism Association, which is NAA conferences. You have ARI conferences. You have AMAP conferences. You have USAAA conferences. I mean, there's just so many, ASA conferences. Really, the list goes on and on for all the conferences out there. We really want to ask them, when's the last time you went to a conference? When's the last time you did any training, with the different doctors out there that are educating the other doctors on autism? Hugely, hugely important. Another thing is you want to ask them, why did they get into autism to begin with? What was their passion? Was there a child in their own life, maybe a son or a daughter, that ended up getting diagnosed? Was there a niece or a nephew? Was there a particular patient that came into their office and it really inspired them to want to learn more? There's always typically a story of why they became involved, and I think that's important for us to know. Another question to ask is, what happens in the middle of the night if something happens to our child and we need to get a hold of them? Do they have a service that we can contact them 24 hours a day and beep them, just like many of our other doctors, our pediatricians or our general doctors? And again, these are just questions we need to ask them, and again, find out, what is the best fit for our family. One thing, when we're looking at doctors, we want to make sure that they're on the same page, because again, outside the box, we even have, things like dietitians and nutritionists. These are important for us to have on our team. They're not necessarily what we think of as mainstream doctors, but we want our doctor to be able to work with our nutritionist or dietitian. We want our doctor to be able to understand our physical therapist or occupational therapist or a speech language pathologist or our behavioral specialist or our play specialist. These are important questions to kind of get out of the way in the beginning, because if they don't seem like a fit, the last thing we want to do is convince them of what we're doing that we're seeing working and then have them go against that. We want our team to be very synergistic, and it's important for our doctor to play a key role in that. And so these are things that we want to find out, with our doctor. Another thing to think about when we're working with doctors specializing in autism is that sometimes what happens is we've been working with our doctor for a while, and our doctor is great, but maybe perhaps sometimes our children may plateau. And by the way, when I say children, I mean children of any age. I don't care if you're 2 or 52, you're somebody's child. So perhaps our children maybe plateau, and maybe we need to get a new pair of eyes. It does not mean anything negative about the doctor we're using, and I don't want you guys to be afraid to switch, meaning maybe there's another doctor that you want to try and see if their eyes see something different. I absolutely recommend that, and I think most doctors out there themselves would recommend that. So I want to encourage you guys, if you're already with a doctor and you've been with them for years and your child's been like this for quite a while, perhaps jump and look for another doctor, and bring your old doctor into your new doctor and let them know, like, you know what, I've been with this doctor for 3 years and we've seen great changes, but now we're kind of plateaued. I now want to work with you, and my original doctor, can you please send all of our notes and files over to our new doctor? If you're working with a doctor that is, wanting to be on your team, feeling that they are, part of almost like your family, absolutely they should be wanting to give that to the new doctor. And again, don't be afraid. It doesn't mean anything about them. And I've talked to so many parents who get afraid about that, and I really wouldn't. Our doctors are there to help our kids, and us as parents, we are our children's advocate. So we have to be really comfortable in advocating for what's best for our children. Okay, so that's the doctor portion of it. When we're looking at toxin-free cleaners, you might think to yourself, well, why are cleaners important? Well, many of us think of our children as being very toxic overloaded already, right? They're very, very sensitive to foods, and they're also very sensitive to cleaners in the house and just toxic environment in general, right? Think of it as this kind of bucket of toxins, and the last thing we want to do, our children's bucket's already overflowing. The last thing we want to do is basically add more toxins to this bucket, right? So these are things that are really kind of easy to do. Household cleaners. We're already cleaning our toilets. We're already washing our floors. We're already washing our clothes, washing our dishes, cleaning our countertops. All I'm asking you to do is switch one cleaner for another. That's it. I'm not asking you to do some radical change, but again, it's not hard to do today. Years ago it might have been harder to switch because maybe you could only find these cleaners, in certain particular health food stores. But now, almost every store in the country that I've been into have some form of toxic or toxin-free cleaners. Also, make sure to ask your stores. Our health food markets are great at knowing about a lot of the products because a lot of times they get product training, and so it's really nice to be able to use them and kind of pick their brains on which cleaners are the best. If you're ever in doubt when you're looking at the label of the cleaner, and maybe they only list 3 or 4 things, but maybe you want to make sure that it doesn't have maybe gluten in it. A lot of us forget that a lot of these products, like different soaps, could have gluten in them, and so we want to make sure we call that manufacturer up and make sure what's listed on the actual ingredients is what's really in them. The more natural the product is, I believe the safer it is. And again, not asking you to live in a bubble, but again, if it's a cleaner, we can just switch out one or the other. Very simple to do. Today, the prices aren't much higher, or sometimes you can actually get them lower when they're on sale. So that's not really an obstacle anymore like we used to have. When we're looking at toiletries, even like our hair shampoos and our conditioners, maybe our lotions, our toothpastes, our bubble baths, these are all things that we want to also make sure, to me, rule of thumb, if it has more than 5 or 6 ingredients, I'm probably not going to buy it. I really want to have it as natural as possible. And, even for my son, we were doing the diet, the gluten-free, casein-free diet, and actually a little bit even stricter than that. And here I was trying to remove all the gluten, and I had no idea that in his bubble bath at the time there was gluten. So here I am soaking him in gluten every night, not having any idea of that, and trying to make his diet as best I can. So these are things to think about and to really investigate. Another thing to think about on top of that is even things our children are playing with, and even though these aren't household cleaners, but like our Play-Doh, we want to make sure the Play-Doh doesn't have gluten in them. We can make it ourselves. Another thing is stickers. Sometimes even stickers have gluten in them. And so we want to be really careful what we're bringing into our house is as safe for our children as possible.